Fellas, I'm kind of sick of talking about UFC champions, so I'm going to be going over the most competitive non-title fights in every UFC division. This can be between, former champions or just up-and-coming contenders. Pretty easy concept to get the idea of, so we'll be doing it in every weight class, starting off with heavyweight. I think the most competitive non-title fight in heavyweight, and by the way, I'm not going to be including Tom Aspinall because technically he's not the actual undisputed champion, but he still has a belt. But heavyweight, I think it's Ciryl Gane versus Jailton Almeida. They both complement each other really well in the sense it's a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Ciryl Gane's got all the experience at the top level. He's been against so many other contenders. He's beaten people like Volkov. He's also beaten Derek Lewis, Taito Ivaza, Sergey Spivak, whereas Almeida's best win is a Derek Lewis. So technically, Ciryl Gane has the experience, but you can also say that although Ciryl Gane's amazing on the feet, and he might be probably better than Almeida on the feet, he's also had a history of losing to grapplers. Obviously lost to Francis Ngannou, who isn't really a grappler anyway, lost to John Jones, obviously, and a guy like Jailton Almeida, he's one of the most dominant and high output grapplers in the heavyweight division. We saw what he did to Derek Lewis with similar what he's done to, Rosenstrike. He is an insane grappler, and that could honestly pose problems to Ciryl Gane. So it'll be good to see if Ciryl Gane's takedown defense has improved since the John Jones fight. I know he fought Spivak, but Spivak's not the same type of grappler that Almeida is. So I think these two would put on an insanely competitive fight. Winner can get a title shot against Aspinall or whatever. But yeah, two best in the division, excluding the two champs, in my opinion. Both going to be, I assume they're going to fight one day anyway. I reckon a bunch of these heavyweights are going to fight each other in this. In my opinion, is the most competitive one we've got. Light heavyweight, I've gone for Jamal Hill versus Ankalaev. How this hasn't happened, I don't know. But yeah, this is really competitive, for both the fighters. We've got Magomed Ankalaev on one hand, who's, he's a really good fighter, but the guy needs to get the rhythm going. It's like he's got a curse going on. Obviously, the draw with, what's his name, Jan Blachowicz, the fight with Johnny Walker that got called off, and even against Ion Cutelaba, where the first fight was, argued at early stoppage. I feel like this guy's got such a cursed career, but he's a dangerous fighter. He's really well-rounded. I'd say he's one of the most well-rounded light heavyweights right now. He's an amazing grappler, amazing striker as well. Whereas Jamal Hill, on the other hand, obviously, insane power, great striker as well. Didn't really lose the belt either. He had to lose it. Well, he did lose it, but he vacated it because of an injury. No one took it off him. Both of them also have something in common. Is they both lost to Paul Craig, which that just shows how good Paul Craig is in the UFC. But this would be a really competitive fight. Again, it's another one of these fights I can definitely see happening. Maybe if one of them loses to Pereira, they'll match each other against each other. If Hill loses to Pereira and Ankalaev beats Walker, they might get matched up against each other. But I reckon we'll see them against each other one day, and it's a really competitive fight. Two best in the division outside of Pereira, in my opinion. And yeah, that's the fight I want to see. Middleweight, it's Adesanya Chimaev. There's a lot of people at middleweight that you could class. There's obviously people like Cannonier, there's Dricus du Plessis, but I think Adesanya versus Khamzat Chimaev is one, not only just in the middleweight division, but one of the best non-title fights that you can make in the UFC right now. You've got two massive stars in Adesanya and Chimaev fighting for a non-title fight. Again, it's another classic striker versus grappler. I feel like people are going to have mixed opinions on this fight. People are going to argue that, listen, early on in the fight, Khamzat Chimaev is going to be dangerous. We know about Adesanya's striking and how good he is, but early on in the fight, I want to say that Khamzat Chimaev could absolutely maul Izzy. I'm not saying he will, but it could happen. He could take him down and submit Izzy like it's nothing. Look what he did to Kamaru Usman. Usman's a way better grappler than Izzy, and I know Izzy, he's got great takedown defense, but that's against people like Marvin Vettori. He's never fought a grappler like Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat has the capability to absolutely ragdoll Izzy, but we know about Khamzat's cardio. We know he's got some suspicious stamina. If he gets in the later rounds, you're going to have to favour Adesanya for this fight just because of the experience and how good he is, especially in the later rounds as well. So I think this is a great fight. If Khamzat Chimaev can beat Adesanya, then that obviously gives him a title shot. And if Adesanya can beat a guy like Khamzat Chimaev and stop an undefeated, hungry contender like Chimaev, that's a massive win for Adesanya. And in my opinion, it's the most competitive, it's also one of the most competitive striker versus grappler matchups you can make in the UFC. Like, such a good matchup. The build-up would be insane, and I think it would be super competitive. Welterweight, I've gone Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat. These two not arguably, they do deserve a title shot. I'd say Belal earns it more because he got the win over Burns before Shavkat got the win over Wonderboy. But this is a super competitive fight. It's a grappler versus grappler, both upcoming contenders. Belal's on a hot streak. Shavkat's literally finished every single one of his opponents. But You've got Belal Muhammad in one hand, where I'd say he's got better striking than Shavkat, but he's less dangerous than Shavkat. He's more of a lay and pray type style. He can hold his own on the feet. He's dominant on the ground, but we haven't seen him dominant on the ground against a guy with the submission offense of Shavkat Rakhmonov, who's way more dangerous when it comes to submissions than Belal. Also an insane grappler. I hope we see this fight one day. I don't care if Belal beats Leon and then we see Shavkat versus Belal, or Belal loses and then we see Shavkat versus Belal. I want to see this fight one day because of the grappling and the grappling exchanges that they're going to have, because I'm really curious how the grappling styles will complement each other. And even on the feet, I just want to see this fight, man. I think it's super competitive. They're both the best in the division right now outside of Leon, and I know there's obviously Usman, but Usman's on a bit of a losing streak. I don't think we can really stick him in a super competitive fight. Plus, he has just fought a middleweight, so I feel a bit weird putting him in the welterweight division. But I'm going Shavkat and Belal for welterweight. Lightweight, I'm going former champ Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. This fight could actually happen, They've been talking a lot on Twitter, well, especially Arman Tsarukyan and Instagram and things, about fighting each other, and it kind of makes sense. If Gaethje's going to be fighting Islam, does Oliveira really want to wait pretty much a year for a fight? I don't know if he does, and a win over Arman Tsarukyan would be massive. This is, again, a super competitive matchup. You've got Charles Oliveira on one end. I mean, they've both just come off a first-round knockout over Beneil Dariush, so that's something they have in common. You've got Arman Tsarukyan, who could well finish Oliveira. He's got everything he needs. He's an extremely well-rounded fighter. He's a great grappler, great striker, power in his hands, and Oliveira, the same thing. The most threatening submission artist in the UFC, knockout power as well. And I feel like I don't know if we're going to see this matchup. I hope we do, though, because they're close to fighting each other. They'll be talking about fighting each other, and it'll be a super competitive fight. I think this is the best matchup we can make at 155, excluding Islam Makhachev. So if we take Islam out of the division, I think this is the most competitive, because Oliveira is the best in the division outside of Islam. I know there's Gaethje and things, but we've already seen Oliveira and Gaethje. I want to see Arman Tsarukyan and Oliveira. I think it would be super competitive. I don't know who I'd actually bet money on, because, again, it's so competitive. So that's the matchup for lightweight. Featherweight, I'm going Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. Again, it's another fight that I think we could actually see happen. If Volkanovski ever retires, or if Volkanovski loses to Topuria and then loses the immediate rematch that he's most likely going to get, Holloway's definitely next in line for a title fight. Topuria versus Holloway is an insane fight. It is an insane fight because you've got Holloway on one end, he's the best in the division, best at 145 if Volkanovski doesn't exist. Starched pretty much everyone Volkanovski's beaten, not included, but also people like Allen as well. Holloway's insane. One of the best strikers in the UFC as well. And then Topuria, this undefeated guy, extremely well-rounded, amazing submissions, amazing grappling, threatening on the feet as well, powerful on the feet. We just saw how he took care of Josh Emmett. We've seen how he's taken care of people like Bryce Mitchell as well in the past, and other grapplers like Ryan Hall. Topuria versus Holloway, it'd be such a good matchup, and I really want to see this because I feel like Topuria, and I know we say this about every contender that Holloway faces, but I feel like Topuria could be the guy to beat Volkanovski outside of Volkanovski. I think he's got everything it takes. But on the other end as well, you've got Max Holloway. He's got more experience, more top wins, and it's Max Holloway. The guy is pretty much unbeatable unless your name's Alexander Volkanovski. So it's a matchup I want to see. The best non-title fight, in my opinion, that you can make outside of Volkanovski versus Holloway. We've already seen Holloway versus Yair Rodriguez, so I want to see Topuria versus Holloway. I hope we do see it one day, whether, Topuria beats or loses to Volkanovski. I really want to see this matchup. Bantamweight, I've gone with Merab versus Corey Sandhagen. Obviously, we've got Merab versus Cejudo, but this isn't prime Cejudo. This is a Cejudo coming off a loss to Aljamain Sterling. And by the way, I haven't included Aljamain Sterling in the bantamweight division because he has just been announced that he's going to be fighting at 145 against Calvin Kattar. So I've gone with Merab and Sandhagen. Both of them deserve a title shot. Obviously, Sandhagen's been beating people like Rob Font. Just got a win over Marlon Vera as well. And obviously, Merab put on one of the most dominant performances in the UFC against Peter Yan. Previous to that beating Aldo. They both deserve a title shot. I thought this was the perfect fight to make. I know Corey was injured, so I understand why it didn't happen. But if Corey wasn't injured, this would have been the fight to make. But the winner of this fight gets a title shot against O'Malley. And I really believe that both of these guys, one of them will become champion one day. Whether it's Merab beating Cejudo or Sandhagen getting his title shot, I want to see them fight each other. The styles complement each other really well as well. You know, you've got Merab, who's this insanely high output, high-paced grappler with insane cardio and can hold his own on the feet as well. And then you've got Sandhagen on the other end, who's extremely balanced. He's a great striker, great grappler as well, as we've seen in his last few fights, although they have been against strikers. So it'll be good to see Sandhagen against a guy who can actually grapple him, Merab. And this is an insane matchup. I think this should have happened instead of Cejudo, but I understand why it didn't happen because Sandhagen was injured. So Merab and Corey Sandhagen, I hope we see this fight one day. And then finally, Flyweight. Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval 2. They fought before, Moreno won, and I want to see this rematch again. Now, I'm not saying this makes sense to do now, because obviously if Moreno gets a win over Albazi, he's most likely going to end up fighting for the belt again, and Brandon Royval's probably going to have to face some lower tier contender because he's already lost to Moreno. But I think outside of Pantoja, these two are the best in the division. I don't think Amir Albazi's the best in the division. I think he's good, but the way he shouldn't have got the win over Kai Kara France, and I think Moreno's going to run through him. But yeah, both these guys, I mean, obviously, you know, Royval lost, but Royval has improved so much since the Moreno fight. Not only on the feet, but on the ground as well. He's improved everywhere. He's become way more well-rounded. And with Moreno, the guy's just been against starching contenders like Kai Kara France. The only guy he's not been able to get past is occasionally Figueiredo and Pantoja. So Moreno versus Royval 2, I think it'll be a super competitive fight. I think the stakes will be, you know, up for both of them, and I feel like Royval's got a way bigger chance of winning this fight than he did the first time. So Moreno and Royval, I want to see them against each other. Hopefully we can see them against each other, and yeah, that is, in my opinion, the most competitive non-title fight in every UFC division. Let me know your thoughts on this. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there any matchups I've missed out? But anyway, thank you for watching.